Hello, today I'm going to be making a sandwich loaf a little bit differently than I normally do. Normally I would just use some sourdough discard and some yeast and water and flour, pretty much a little bit butter. But today I'm going to try it with sourdough discard, with milk and with egg. So it's a little bit different for me and I'm just curious to see what happens. So here I've got half a cup of warm milk and I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast to that. So here I'm just blooming the yeast. Oh, and I forgot my honey. So the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of sugar, and that's a lot for me. So I'm doing, I don't know, about 1 tablespoon-ish of honey. I'm gonna mix this all up. Ideally, I would have put the honey into the milk before adding the yeast, but should be okay. All right, so I'm gonna let this bloom here, which means get nice and bubbly. And while I wait for that, I'm gonna prepare my dry ingredients. I'm gonna take my bowl. I'm going to be adding 2 cups of flour. Now I'm just using all-purpose flour here. You could use bread flour. Make much of a difference as far as I've seen. I'll use my bread flour for country loaves and things like that. But for a sandwich loaf, I'm just going to use all-purpose flour. I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. I'm just waiting for my yeast to do what it's gonna do. It's looking pretty good so far. This is my first time blooming yeast in milk rather than water. So I'm really curious to see what it's gonna do. I've been making my own bread for about, I would say a little over 2 years now. The reason I started to make my own sandwich bread was, I remember the last loaf I bought. The last loaf I bought at the grocery store, I left on the counter. It was end of December. My kids will either really be into sandwiches for a short time and then they won't want a sandwich at all for a while. So sandwich bread kind of, sometimes it goes really fast and sometimes it doesn't. That loaf in particular hung around for 3 weeks. It sat on the counter and just waited, was neglected. And when I got back to it, there was not a sign of mold. That thing was in perfect condition 3 weeks later. Honestly, that really concerned me. No fresh ingredient should just be able to sit around with no sign of degradation for 3 weeks. And so I really started to kind of be grossed out by that. And that's what really kickstarted my journey into bread making. I was really nervous. Bread was very daunting, harder than cakes and cookies. Over the years, I've learned more and more and more, and I'm at a point now where I'm using sourdough discard to make sandwich loaves, which I love. But I will use sourdough discard with yeast, and that gives me a really nice bread. Now, I really wanted to make a bread with milk and with egg, and I want to use my discard. And so here we are. We're trying it out. So let me get my discard. Okay, so what is discard? Discard is basically just if you are feeding your sourdough starter regularly, it's whatever you would skim off in order not to have too much. But really, I don't use my very active sourdough starter. I use the discard. When I first started making sourdough, I was disappointed that I had to throw away so much, discard, discard, discard. Every day you have to throw away so much of it. I thought that was so wasteful. Turns out I misunderstood, and you can use the discard for lots of stuff. It just doesn't have that same activity that the fresh starter does. I fed this guy yesterday. He's just been sitting on the counter. This may or may not be considered active. I think it is, but whatever, it'll be fine. 1 cup. Ideally, I would weigh this, but for this recipe, I don't have the weight measurements, so I'm going with cups, and that's okay. Let me mix up my flour and salt. My yeast is looking nice and bubbly. I'm gonna add it. So here is my discard. Now, since I'm not weighing it, I really want to get every last bit out of that. So I'm gonna get a spatula and scrape it. I'm gonna scrape this puppy out. There we go. We've got flour. Oh, so hard to see. Check this out. This is my milk and yeast combination. It's looking nice and frothy. So I'm gonna add that as well. Came out as a chunk. So I'm adding some melted butter. I've got 2 tablespoons of melted butter, and I've cooled it because I don't want to cook any of my ingredients yet. And an egg. Look at this beautiful egg. Now I've got my mixture on the mixer, and I'm going to set that to 3, so kind of medium low, and I'm gonna let the mixer mix it until it forms a nice ball, and then we'll get back to it. This is my dough right now. That is too wet for me, so I'm gonna add some flour. We're gonna try a window pane test. It's been about 5, 6, 7 minutes. A window pane test is when I'm gonna grab a little bit of dough and I'm going to stretch it between my fingers to see if, well, look at this. This one's not working. So I got a little piece of dough and trying to stretch it to see if I can kind of see through it, but see how it's ripping at the corners? Not ready. So that means it needs to mix up more. Okay, so it's been going for about 2 more minutes. It's not a lot of time. Let's check it. This feels maybe more promising. It's pretty sticky. Oh, that's pretty good. Now that we have some good stretch to our dough, and I'm gonna let it sit. Now, here's our ball of dough. It's a little sticky at the bottom. All right, I'm gonna grease a bowl. A little bit of avocado oil in here. All right. Ooh, this is a nice dough, beautiful. It smells good. Okay, and now I'm gonna put it in this greased bowl, this nice ball. Here's what it looks like. Okay, and now we're gonna let it sit for about an hour. And what we want is for it to double in size. The kitchen towel, and I'm gonna let it sit. Hi. Okay, so we're back. Ooh, look at this dough. Can you see it? That would be doubled. We're gonna be dumping out our flour. Yes, go ahead. Dump out the flour, the dough. All right, look at that nice ball of dough. This will be 1 loaf. And we're gonna roll this nice and tight. Yeah. All right, here is a beautiful, there we go. Okay, now we're gonna let this rest. We're gonna let this rest for another half hour. All right, so we have preheated our oven to 375. I did that while I was letting the loaf rise a second time. So here's what it looks like. It's been about a half hour or so. And I'm gonna pop it in the oven. Okay, so it's been 40 minutes, and we are going to take the bread out of the oven. Let's take a look here. What a beautiful bread.
Now let's cut into this bread.
Ooh, this looks nice. Look at this beautiful bread.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Grow Waco.